In the year 79 CE, the mighty heart of Rome echoed with the thunderous excitement of 50,000 people. Beneath the vast amphitheater, the grandest the world had ever seen, a young woman named Livia stood in chains, hidden in the shadowy corridors below. Every cheer from the crowd above rumbled through the stone floors, a cruel song celebrating the victory of a gladiator who, just moments earlier, had killed Livia's own kin. Over the next 3 hours, Livia would face a fate so horrific, the truth became an imperial secret spoken of only in whispers, and sometimes erased from Rome's official history. What happened wasn't just rumor, there's real proof. We find it in the writings of the historian Cassius Dio, in discoveries made beneath the Colosseum in 2018, and in Senate records later sealed in the Vatican vaults. The Colosseum, finished only the year before, stood as a stunning symbol of Roman ambition. But it was also a stage where brilliance and cruelty played out for all to see. Beneath its shining exterior, the Colosseum hid another world, a maze of tunnels, cages, and secret chambers below the arena floor. Here in Rome, it wasn't just wild beasts or weapons that were housed. The city also imprisoned its most coveted captives, those sentenced to death, captured enemies, and the newly defeated. Beneath the looming shadow of imperial glory, the circus games were far more than simple entertainment. They became a stage for power, a ritual, a warning, and a powerful tool to shape the will of society. When General Marcus Antonius returned, victorious from his battle with the Dacia tribes, he brought back more than just gold and new lands. He led a broken procession, 847 prisoners in total, with 144 women chosen from the highest ranks of their people, chieftains' daughters, warriors' wives, and priestesses who worshipped strange gods. For Rome, victory was never enough. True triumph meant humiliation. Rome was committed to destroying symbols of hope, gaining control over bodies and spirits, and crushing rebellion so thoroughly that even the memory of defiance would be erased. Among the cheering victors stood Gaius Valerius Maximus, a man impossible to miss. He was 32 years old, nearly 2 meters tall, his body marked with scars from battles survived. Gaius's journey began in tragedy. He was born into bondage after his father was executed for unpaid debts. For 14 relentless years, he survived as a gladiator, turning violence into survival and bloodshed into spectacle. Above all else, Gaius yearned for the rudius, the wooden sword that symbolized a long-denied freedom. But what haunted him most was the fear of dying faceless and forgotten, discarded like refuse on the sand. On a humid August day in the year 79, Gaius claimed yet another victory. This time, he defeated the leading prisoner's champion, all under the keen gaze of Emperor Titus. His spoils were the usual rewards: 500 gold denarii, a laurel crown, and the right to choose one captive. Livia was just 19, and she carried the striking beauty of the Dacia Highlands: pale skin, dark hair, and eyes that burned with unbreakable pride. The Romans had set her home ablaze. Once, she was promised to a warrior named Despilis, but Roman swords took his life just 3 months ago. In the emptiness that followed, Livia held on to one thing: the hope of dying with honor. But on that fateful morning, everything changed. A guard arrived with news Livia never could have expected. She was to take part in the afternoon's bloody spectacle. Yet she had no idea that what Rome called mercy could chill the soul even more than open cruelty. Imagine for a moment the silence in those dark, shadowed tunnels, the sharp scent of cold, damp stone mixed with sweat, and faint cries drifting from distant cells. The Romans called this a merciful chance, a glimmer of hope offered through violence and humiliation. But beneath the thin surface of entertainment, the games of the Colosseum were relentless in their purpose to break spirits again and again. Rome had always understood that conquering territory was just the first step. To truly break a people, their sacred symbols had to be tarnished, their gods ridiculed, and their women paraded as trophies of Roman power. On that day, deep beneath the Colosseum, the machinery of humiliation began to whir. Captives were washed and prepared, dressed in simple linen. Official scribes carefully recorded every detail, writing notes onto wax tablets. They cataloged each captive's body, health, and face, reducing living people to mere artifacts of defeat. Zalmaxis, an aged priestess bearing sorrow in every wrinkle, leaned in close to Livia and whispered, "They are preparing us either for a spectacle or for horrors yet to come." As the midday sun blazed overhead, 20 women were herded onto hidden elevators beneath the arena floor. These massive platforms of timber and iron, marvels of Roman engineering, were designed to propel animals, fighters, and victims up into the chaos above. Livia stepped out and was instantly engulfed by blazing light and deafening noise. The air pressed hot against her skin, filled with swirling dust, the sharp tang of sweat, and a lingering hint of old blood. One by one, the women stood before the frenzied crowds. A herald's voice rang out, listing their crimes, defying Rome, sheltering fugitives, refusing to worship the Roman gods. Then came the sentence. Each woman was given a slim, fragile hope of survival. They would have to fight another one of their own. Each was handed a crude wooden blade and dressed in rough cloth. The battles would be fought in pairs. Survival belonged to the victors, who would then become prizes for Rome's finest. For those who lost, only death awaited. A cold dread swept through Livia. Standing across from her was Maximus, her fiancé's sister, and a friend since childhood. When the signal to begin echoed through the arena, neither woman moved. Their stillness set the crowd on fire. Roars turned to taunts, and garbage rained down from the seats. Yet, for 90 seconds, they stood their ground. Silent statues defying an empire that thrived on obedience. Their rebellion wasn't about bloodshed, but about refusing to play. It was pure, unwavering defiance. Rome's patience didn't last. Guards stormed the sand, striking Maximus and dragging Livia away. The arena's uproar drowned out the spectacle. What started as a performance had become a protest, and this time, execution did not follow. Instead, the women encountered what Rome euphemistically called the rewards for the conquerors. The official records were brief and cold. 20 captives taken from Dia, processed under the so-called rules of victory, 2 singled out for the champion's use. This empty language hid a system of domination so organized, so ruthless, it ran as routinely as any office job. Every ritual, every so-called honor, every conquered person became just another cog in this unstoppable machine, not driven by revenge, but by Rome's need for total control. As Maximus entered the dim chamber where Livia waited, torchlight flickered, casting long, restless shadows across the stone. He moved toward her, blood from the fight still crusted on his skin, a laurel crown resting on his head. In this room, power belonged entirely to him. All she had was her courage. Yet what happened next would have no place in the codes of Roman law. Cassius, the fighters called him the Colossus, set his helmet gently aside and took a seat, letting silence fill the space. After a pause, his voice edged with uncertainty, he asked, "His name, who was he?" Livia's answer was barely more than a whisper. "The man you were forced to let me watch die." Inside those bleak prison walls, something remarkable began, a conversation between victim and executioner, between a man shaped by violence and a woman condemned because of her love. Silence settled thickly around them, broken only by the distant thunder of the games above. It was a stark reminder the spectacle continued on, indifferent to the struggles unfolding below. Livia looked aghast, a man who, just hours ago, had carried the Empire's victories like armor. Now, he seemed hollowed out by his own triumph. At last, his voice thin from confession, he admitted to killing a warrior named Desbulus, perhaps the very man Livia had once promised her future to. He spoke of watching his father's death, of years crushed by chains, and of the quiet fear that he would leave behind nothing but a name, lost among countless fallen gladiators. Livia answered with her own stories of her home destroyed, flames and screams filling the air, choking dust, and the unbreakable promise she made to never beg for mercy. Inside those stone walls, stripped of dignity by fate, they struggled to restore a sense of humanity within each other. Twice guards marched by and heard their voices. They thought the champion was simply claiming his prize. But in reality, Gas was turning his back on Rome's cruel traditions. When the bell rang 6 times, Valerius made a choice that would change his life forever. He stood up, called for the guards, and said in a calm, firm voice, "This woman is unwell. She must see the physician." That simple lie offered her a fragile sliver of hope. In an empire where everything was recorded, only illness could offer true exoneration, a unique loophole. Even Rome respected it, because disease brought more fear than shame. The guard paused, his gaze lingering for a moment. He understood, but chose to say nothing. In Roman bureaucracy, efficiency always outweighed conscience. Livia was quietly escorted to the medical quarters. 3 days later, a minor infection took her life. She died alone and unnoticed, her name quickly fading into oblivion. Gas returned to the arena battered but still defiant. That month, he survived 2 more brutal contests, and each time turned away the rewards offered to him. Whispers drifted through the ranks. Some said madness had taken him. Others believed he had fallen under the spell of a mysterious Eastern faith that spoke of mercy. But the truth was even simpler. He had rediscovered his own humanity. The transformation of Gas Valerius Maximus did not go unnoticed. In a place where empathy was seen as weakness, his quiet resistance echoed through the sleeping quarters and shadowy corridors of the Colosseum. Rome, determined to enforce conformity, could not ignore this disruption for long. On September the 15th, in the year 79, the Senate received significant news. Senator Quintus Aurelius Semicus had filed a formal complaint after his nephew, a young gladiator, was beaten for following in Gas's rebellious footsteps. Word of the incident began to spread quickly, much like the very contagion Rome so deeply feared. One man, one champion, chose to reject the privileges that came with his victories. The Senate, unsettled by this quiet act of defiance, called an urgent assembly. For 4 hours, Rome's most powerful leaders argued fiercely. Their debate was not about mercy, but about one central issue: authority. On one side stood the die-hard traditionalists, led by Fabius, fiercely believing that Rome's power was forged through brute force. Our empire was built by subduing both body and spirit, they declared. Facing them was a smaller group of reform-minded senators, influenced by Stoic philosophy and troubled by unrest in distant provinces. Recent reports described uprisings fueled by tales of abused captives and desecrated holy sites. 3 provincial governors had already raised the alarm, warning that Rome's cruelty was quickly becoming its greatest weakness. As unrest grew, the Senate called for a vote. The outcome was a new law, Lex Captivi, put into effect on the 1st of October that year. This edict banned gladiators and champions from publicly claiming female prisoners of war as trophies. It didn't end slavery, nor did it stop all forms of abuse. But its impact was more subtle. For the first time, the public display of cruelty was removed from the games. Rome now had to at least appear to exercise restraint. Though enforcement was inconsistent, a new idea had taken root. Even an empire built on violence sometimes needed to wear a mask of decency. 3 months after these reforms, Gas Valerius Maximus finally earned his rudis, the prized wooden sword that symbolized his freedom. This was no act of mercy. He won his liberation through 5 more hard-fought victories after Livia's death. He walked out of the Colosseum, no longer a slave. The records tell us his next step: he bought and then freed a woman from Dia named Cassius. Was she the same woman who stood bravely beside Livia that day? History doesn't give a clear answer, but all the evidence seems to point that way. This story could have vanished, fading into the quiet of forgotten voices. But instead, it survived hidden in scattered lines of Senate scrolls, in fragments from scholars' records, and in whispered tales among slaves. These stories were passed down as sacred legends to those who needed hope most. Gas died years later. His passing went unnoticed by Rome's elite, but was quietly remembered by those whose lives he had touched. His act of resistance seemed small at first, a tiny crack in the solid foundation of imperial power. But even a small crack can be a sign of change. His single act of compassion lingered, a reminder that even in one of history's harshest regimes, mercy could still take root. As time moved on, Roman chroniclers rarely wrote about the Lex Captivi. When they did, it was only in passing, perhaps weighed down by shame or fear, reluctant to confront the true reasons behind the law. Later, in the Middle Ages, monks copying ancient texts condensed it even further, leaving behind only cryptic notes about morality. The heart of the story faded, lost to time and forgetfulness. It wasn't until the early 21st century that these hidden truths began to reemerge. In 2018, beneath the eastern arcades of the Colosseum, a team from the University of Rome, led by Dr. Isabella Fortunato, made a staggering discovery. Hidden below the arena's foundations, they found a series of small rectangular chambers locked and untouched for nearly 2,000 years. Inside, iron rings were mounted on the cold stone walls, hinting at the people who once waited there. Along the floors, narrow grooves funneled fluids toward concealed drains. On the bricks, scratch marks revealed desperate resistance. Carbon dating confirmed these chambers' true age. They were not later additions, they were part of the Colosseum's original blueprint. Inside, researchers discovered shards of pottery, signs of hurried meals, and perhaps most chilling of all, 6 bronze plaques. Each was stamped with the word Captiva and dated between AD 79 and 82. These silent objects spoke more powerfully than any written scroll. This was no ordinary prison. These rooms had been sorting stations where captured women were distributed like property to their Roman claimants. By piecing together these archaeological clues with ancient accounts from Cassius Dio and letters from Suetonius, Dr. Fortunato uncovered a disturbing truth. The trafficking of captives was routine, woven deeply into the fabric of the empire. The famous silence of chroniclers like Tacitus, known for their unflinching reports of Rome's excesses, suddenly made sense. Some realities, even in Rome, were too much for words. The possibility of revealing these discoveries to the world sent shockwaves through academic circles. Some experts feared that exposing the grim details would just fuel centuries-old voyeurism, turning ancient suffering into a new kind of entertainment. Others argued that keeping these truths hidden only allowed history's darkest moments to quietly repeat themselves. She said, "Truth doesn't tarnish history. It cleanses it, forcing us to face the cold reality, the stones, the desperate scratch marks, and the artifacts we uncover." Then she continued, "We come to recognize something vital. The line between civilization and savagery isn't drawn by marble halls or by technology. It's built on a foundation of compassion. Rome's legacy is more than aqueducts, wide highways, or grand amphitheaters. Beneath these marvels, the empire also built hidden rooms for suffering, constructed with as much care as everything above the ground. In the Roman psyche, magnificence and brutality lived side by side, each one reinforcing the other. In that uneasy space, Gas and Livia became more than people. They became symbols. They embodied the eternal conflict within us all. They stood for dignity in the face of power and resilience when confronting oppression. Their encounter was brief, unlikely, and born from violence, yet it was a moment where moral courage triumphed over the rule of law. What truly unsettles us isn't just Livia's execution, but society's determination to wipe her from memory. If redemption can be found in Rome's legacy, it isn't in the blade Gas wielded, but in his decision to let mercy triumph over vengeance. As the years passed, the sharp edges of these events softened, and their details faded. The empire itself eventually fell, but its echoes remained. The Colosseum stones, stripped now of their violent history, still carry scars, silent witnesses to a civilization that once made pain into spectacle. When archaeologists uncovered the Captiva plaques, the story of Livia and Gas Valerius Maximus was no longer just a rumor. It became a mirror reflecting back the timeless question of our own humanity. As researchers dug deeper beneath the arena, they began to unravel the truth behind this labyrinth. It wasn't just a random collection of storage rooms or cages for wild beasts. Instead, it turned out to be a complex, purpose-built facility where every chamber had a specific function in the machinery of Roman oppression. Some rooms housed wild animals, others stored bodies, and there were even smaller, suffocating cells fitted with iron hooks and floor drains used to hold captives who had been handed over to victorious gladiators. None of this was left to chance. It was a blueprint designed for humiliation, with every detail meant to amplify human suffering. In Rome, cruelty wasn't just an excess, it was a part of daily life, embedded in the very structure of society. When archaeologists made their discovery, it set off a heated debate among modern scholars. Some argued that these horrors were rare, only approved for special public events. But critics questioned that idea. Why build permanent structures for something so uncommon? As is often the case, the truth lays somewhere in the middle. These crimes happened often enough to need spaces of their own, yet they remained hidden, so Rome's magnificent reputation stayed untarnished. The 19th century German historian Theodor Mommsen noted that Rome had mastered the art of dehumanization. Even modern movies, like the popular film Gladiator, only scratch the surface of these realities. Beneath the glorified stories of heroic battles, there was a much darker truth. Roman society engineered suffering with almost artistic detail. But why does any of this still matter today, centuries after Rome's ruins were left behind? The lesson here extends far beyond these ancient ruins. Sophisticated cultures and powerful states, even at their most advanced, often find ways to hide brutality behind laws, customs, or impressive displays. Rome wasn't alone in its crimes, but it was unique in the way it organized them. Rome turned cruelty into ceremony, putting death on the public calendar and making it a spectacle. Here, violence wasn't driven by rage, it was carried out with careful routine. The story of Livia and gas makes us examine the real machinery of power, precise, calculating, and utterly unforgiving. Gas, once a slave who became a champion, was both a weapon of the empire and, in the end, its casualty. Livia, stripped of all her status, became nothing more than proof of Rome's power. Yet, when they found a moment together, something in the system cracked. One man chose not to be just an instrument. One woman refused to be merely an object. For a single heartbeat, compassion broke through the relentless machinery of empire before fading once again into silence. Long after, the ghost of the Lex Captivi lingered. Despite the law's best intentions, the cruelty it sought to erase crept back in, taking hold in the forgotten corners of the empire. Far from the heart of Rome, in distant provinces beyond the Senate's watch, the old rituals quietly crept back. Captured women were paraded once again as rewards, but this time it was done under veils of secrecy and with new names. The decree had changed only the surface, leaving the core brutality untouched. But something subtle was changing within Rome itself. These acts of violence could no longer parade as joyful public spectacles. They now slipped into the shadows. For the first time, shame began to replace brazen pride. As the centuries passed, Rome slowly unraveled, undone by its own hubris, by rot and by exhaustion. The mighty Colosseum, once a stage for empire and massacre, has weathered into a grand ruin. Its arches and pillars still reach for the sky, a lasting sign of Rome's ambition, but now they echo with emptiness. Just beneath the marble, the truth survives: rusted iron rings, deep grooves worn into stone, and the faintest marks left by human nails, the quiet memory of desperate hopes reaching for daylight. These fragments remain as a stark reminder. Greatness isn't measured by grand structures, but by the fate of the most vulnerable. The true heart of this story isn't found in Livia's final breath or in Gas's brief act of defiance. Instead, it's revealed in the way their meeting makes us reflect on ourselves. The line between civilization and savagery is razor-thin, almost impossible to see. It isn't defined by wealth, knowledge, or even technological advancement. Instead, it depends completely on our willingness to reject cruelty, even when all the laws say it's allowed. Rome, for all its grandeur, wove brutality into the fabric of everyday life. Its people cheered for what should have filled them with sorrow, and that contradiction still lingers to this day. From modern superpowers to ancient, long-lost kingdoms, the pattern is clear: violence, justified by ritual, safety, or progress. Whenever suffering becomes a performance, whenever humanity is traded for spectacle, the shadow of the Colosseum stretches across our own times. Now picture this, the last flicker of hope in Livia's eyes. See her, isolated among rows of the wounded, deep beneath the empire's grandest arena. Fever courses through her, every breath growing shallower. Could she ever have guessed her name would be uncovered from the dust of centuries? That, long after her time, her story would be pieced together from bronze etchings? Probably not. In that moment, all she may have wanted was to be remembered not as just another number in a bureaucratic report, but as a real person. Gas's action didn't topple the empire or erase its cruelty. To those in power, his gesture was insignificant. But in a world designed to suppress kindness, even a small act of compassion mattered. That one moment of decency couldn't change history, but it was enough to keep her memory alive. Her story drifted through generations, carried as a whispered legend written in ink and uncovered by the dust-caked hands of archaeologists. The ruins of the Colosseum are more than remnants of lost glory. They're the etched scars of our collective memory. Every golden stone rests on enduring reminders of sacrifice and pain. Behind the majestic facades of ancient buildings, a somber truth endures: the moral wounds of a society that confused power with righteousness. The legacy of Livia and Gas serves as a powerful reminder: history does not always move forward in a straight line. Every new era reaches a crossroads, forced to choose between compassion and control, honesty and comfortable silence. In its prime, Rome chose spectacle over substance, and in time, paid the price with its own downfall. The stone ruins left behind don't proclaim victory. Instead, they echo with warning. Beneath every celebrated triumph and beneath every grand monument, there may still be voices that generations tried to silence. But if we find the courage to listen to those hidden cries, then those who suffered are never truly lost. That is how a gladiator's triumph rewrote a dark chapter in Rome's history. It's the story of 847 souls, stripped of their identities, reduced to mere spoils. Laws meant to uphold justice instead worked to maintain appearances. Yet, one woman's name, Livia, lived on because a single man dared to show compassion. Livia never saw the change she deserved, but her story survives, a quiet whisper that challenges us to remember. Perhaps this is the deepest kind of victory, the victory of memory over forgetting, of dignity overcoming disgrace, and of human spirit triumphing over cold, unfeeling stone. When we stand before the Colosseum, we're often struck by its sheer scale, by the graceful arches, the flawless design, and the genius of ancient engineers. Its magnificence draws crowds from all over the world, yet few realize the multitude of silent shadows lying beneath their feet. Those winding corridors, locked doors, and hidden chambers don't speak of celebration. They speak of survival, not of honor, but of heartbreak. Rome excelled at domination. It mastered governance, turning even cruelty into routine, but it overlooked one simple truth: power without compassion eventually destroys itself from within. For centuries, Rome tried to lay claim even to ethics, building its empire by turning suffering into public entertainment. But when the cheers died down, what remained was the pain. Every generation, in its own way, builds its own monuments, its own Colosseum. Ours may not be carved in marble, but it's there all the same. Every time pain becomes a spectacle, every choice that values convenience over compassion, every silent agreement that protects injustice, these are our Colosseums. Stories like Livia's aren't told to trap us in past tragedies, but to remind us the struggle between caring and turning away never really ends. It just moves to a different place. Rome's real downfall wasn't the crumbling of its buildings, it was the decay of its collective empathy. Centuries later, experts might debate timelines, challenge whether Livia ever existed, or question if the Lex Captivi truly sprang from her story. But buried deep in the Colosseum, the evidence speaks for itself. Patterns left by real people, preserved long after their memories have faded, quietly tell their own undeniable story. In the end, sometimes all history needs to be heard is a single mark left in stone. With every new empire that rises, claiming enlightenment and beauty, a hidden space appears in its shadow, a place where ideals are tested against compassion. The legacy of Livia and Gas isn't just a story made up from imagination, it's a reflection for us to examine. In that reflection, we see both what lifts humanity to greatness and what brings it to shame, the urge to rule, and the deep need to show mercy. As long as their voices echo through the silent stones beneath the Colosseum, the spirit of empathy remains unbroken. This is the story of Livia, of Dea, and Gas, Valerius, Maximus. Two souls caught in the machinery of empire, yet their echoes remain long after Rome's glory faded. Their journey began in bondage and ended in silence, but in those moments they achieved something rare. For a brief heartbeat, their fragile compassion stood against the weight of an empire. Time may blur their faces and fade their names, but their courage endures, drifting softly beneath the ancient arches. It's a reminder that a single act of kindness can, just once, outweigh the might of kings. Memory, even in its softest whisper, lasts long after empires have vanished. The greatest triumph isn't carved into monuments. Instead, it lives within the soul that refuses to let go of the past.